Doctors said that the baby would not live a year. When he was 3 years old, doctors were shocked. The news that a baby will soon appear in a family makes both parents happy. Any mom and dad are waiting for the birth of a healthy and beautiful baby. But sometimes fate is very cruel. In one family, a baby boy was born. His name was Noah, and doctors discovered terrible congenital anomalies before his birth. The terrible disease could destroy the baby's nervous system and brain and make him disabled for life. But when the boy was 3 years old, the doctors examined him completely and the results shocked them. This story took place in an ordinary family who lived in the north of England. Once the happy newlyweds, the Walls realized that soon they would have a new family member. The future mother, Shelley, was really happy. The pregnancy went well, but for a period of 3 months, the doctors announced to the woman a terrible sentence for her unborn child. It was a very serious disease: spinal dislocation. This ailment is very dangerous for the baby because it damages the bones of the baby and interferes with his normal development. Having diagnosed the unborn child of the Walls, the doctors recommended that they terminate the pregnancy. Shelley and Rob were very worried about their son, but made a firm decision to give him life. Doctors were very worried about whether the infant with such a diagnosis could survive from that moment on. Shelley was under close medical supervision. The staff carefully monitored her condition and the development of the baby. After conducting a lot of examinations and analysis, the doctors told the future parents another terrible piece of news: that the baby was likely going to be born with paralyzed legs and a lot of additional developmental disorders. A little time later, the unfortunate baby was diagnosed with cerebral edema hydrocephalus. The reason for this was the fluid accumulated in the cranium, which caused a serious malfunction in the brain. On March 6, 2012, the long-awaited firstborn of Rob and Shelley, Noah Wall, was born. Due to the hydrocephalus, the baby's head was simply huge and the woman had to have a cesarean section. Explained in more detail. The brain had accumulated a huge amount of cerebral spinal fluid, due to which there was a strong pressure in his skull. Shelley childbirth proceeded with a lot of difficulties, and the doctors did their best to give the newborn baby as much of a chance of life as possible. In the first hours of his life, the poor baby underwent 2 operations at once. The doctors closed 2 holes in his back and installed a shunt in the cranium, which helped to remove fluid from the brain that was dangerous to his life. Both surgeries went pretty well, but the doctors did not consult the parents and did not give them any predictions for the future. The couple were in a terrible state. They were emotionally exhausted, and all the money in the family was given for the treatment of their son. But Shelley and Rob were not desperate. They hoped for a miracle and sincerely waited for the moment when the worst in their life would be left behind. Later, it turned out that this belief was not in vain. It seemed that luck left the Walls family, but after the difficulties experienced, bitter tears in LA sprayers and sleepless nights, the poor parents finally had a faint ray of hope. Despite the doctor's words that the child would not live even a year, Noah began to show signs of development very slowly. The boy turned out to be a stubborn fighter for his life. By the very fact of his existence, he dispelled all terrible predictions and stubbornly clung to each new day. 3 years passed. Noah's parents arrived at the hospital. The time had come for new examinations and tests. The doctor simply could not find words. Seeing how quickly this baby, who had almost no chance of life, began to develop, they were greatly amazed to find out that the baby had learned to sit and stand on his knees and on all fours. A few years later, in an interview, the head of the family, Rob, admitted, "This is the most difficult and most touching topic for us." After all, almost all of the doctors repeated that Noah would not even live to be 1 year old, and if he did survive, he would be a deeply disabled person. They called our son sick inferior. We barely lived through all this, but believed in him all the time, and our son showed real heroism, overcame enormous difficulties, and continues to fight them. In 2018, when Noah was 6 years old, his parents were invited to speak with reporter. Shelley, with tears in her eyes, said that their family's life had changed dramatically and their son was developing. No matter what, the father proudly boasted that Noah had already begun to speak, and even learned a little how to write. The child himself believes that someday he will definitely get on his feet and fulfill his dream of surfing. This child is definitely worthy of your respect and your likes. Finishing this story, let us tell you an amazing fact. 6-year-old Noah took up real charity work, and all of the inhabitants of the country learned about this with amazement before Christmas. He prepared 2,500 gifts and, dressed as an elf, distributed them to the staff and the patients of the hospital in Newcastle, where the doctors gave him a chance to live. "I was born with a small brain." Noah spoke touchingly about his illness in an interview, "but every day it grows. And grows like my kindness towards all people. I would like to believe that the boy will continue his fighting for his health. We hope that very little time will pass when he will finally be able to fulfill his most cherished desires, to get on his feet and live the most ordinary life of an ordinary boy." That is all for this story. Like and share it with your friends. Until next time.